We really think European butter from France is the best butter, and our friend, the expert baker and best-selling cookbook author David Leibovitz, agrees. Check out our recent episode with David to find out how he cooks with quality butter. And for recipes, tips, and cooking advice, go to tasteeurope.com.
What people don't understand when they're coming from outside of the industry and into it is that it takes a year to grow a carrot. Just to make a plan for scale when you're creating a dehydrated vegetable bar, you got to think about the futures of kale.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Erin Patinkin is the co-founder of Ovenly and has advised some of the food world's most interesting brands, almost exclusively female-founded, including Kismet, White Moustache, Up Grocer, Great Jones, and Seed & Mill. Erin is an old friend of ours and is one of the sharpest minds in the consumer packaged goods world. On this episode, we talk about so many topics, including some of the brands that excite her and the common mistakes founders make but can't help making. We also hear about her time running Ovenly and what is next for Erin Patinkin. It's so great having Erin in, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Erin Patinkin, welcome. This is Taste. Hi.
Hi.
Great to see you.
So good to see you.
Thanks for coming in this morning. I appreciate you driving down from Kingston.
You're welcome.
Let's start with Kingston, because
Okay.
I feel like you have lived there for a while, and it's a really interesting town about 2 hours outside of New York. Really cool food scene. What's happening there?
Well, I bought my house about 5 years ago, and it's really changed in that 5 years, I think, for the better. There was just a lot of empty retail spaces that young folks are coming in and taking and opening things. So it's still small, but it's especially a restaurant scene that is focused truly on farm to table. A lot of the restaurants are working with the farms that are within a 20-mile radius to procure all of their meat and produce. There is a very interesting social justice bent, I think, to the restaurants that are going on upstate. There's a lot of work around doing fundraisers for either progressive policies, progressive politics, LGBTQ rights. It's a really interesting restaurant community because of that, and also because I think a lot of really good stuff is starting to open up there. There's a restaurant called Mirador.
Yeah, let's go into Mirador, which is one of the few I haven't been to, and you were just over the moon about Mirador, and I'd love to give it some space. Why is Mirador so... It's very slept on right now, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
It reminds me, I think there's a nostalgia for me for it. I started my first company, Ovenly, in 2009, and there was such a community of food entrepreneurs in a very small geographic region of Williamsburg, Brooklyn, kind of Park Slope. And there was such a tight-knit community of hospitality people. We would meet for happy hour, have dinners, monthly meetings, et cetera. And, I could walk into my local, which for a long time was diner, and know everybody. And I get that same sense day one out of Mirador. The first time I went in there, I knew a lot of folks. There are a lot of ex-hospitality people from Brooklyn and New York, and it's just such a warm and inviting place. On top of that, they're featuring Spanish food, largely from Jaén, because it's a sherry bar too. Nick, one of the owners, is importing sherry himself. He private labels some of that stuff, and it's just great. The food is phenomenal. The hospitality is phenomenal.
I love how you draw the comparison between Kingston in 24 and Brooklyn in 2010, because I so agree. And I just had to make it clear that Kingston has a lot of full-timers. Like myself, I live in Orange County full-time. You live full-time. We're not like going back and forth in the weekend, nothing against that, but it's a different...
It's our home.
It's our home, and we want to make it our home and where we spend 80, 90% of our time. And Kingston has a lot of people who've left the city, live there. What are a few other restaurants that you like that are in Kingston?
Eliza
yes.
Is great. Cleo,
haven't
amazing.
Been Cleo yet. I've heard great things.
Oh, Cleo's absolutely excellent. And Hope, one of the owners I've known for a long time, she used to be one of the senior people at a conference called FAB, which is
Yep.
conference about women in business and food. And so, there's just going back to the Brooklyn versus upstate, it's starting to feel really complete. I just heard, and I don't know if I'm supposed to know this information,
Right.
but someone gave it to me that the Meat Hook is opening in Hudson. Mel, the
Mel
baker, just opened in Hudson.
Yeah.
There's some really great hospitality people coming up to open places. But I think that there's Harada Market out in Acworth. There's Ollie's Pizza. There's Gaskin's, which Sarah Gaskin has done so much for the Germantown community and bringing good jobs there. I mean, I feel like I'm missing Stissing House.
Yeah.
It's just, there's a really
the whole
good
lower
stuff.
Hudson Valley is phenomenal. And I love just focusing on Kingston too. I think Kingston Bread is a place that you have
Kingston
to
Bread and
stop
Bar is
by.
great.
Amazing. And I really did like my meal with Liza. And I think Phoenicia Diner chef is now running the kitchen there and a co-owner. And I love what they're doing there.
Yeah, Chris.
And what's the place on Lower Broadway that I always forget about, the all day that has the guy from the pasta guy? Rosie's.
Amazing.
Rosie's is a place to definitely keep your eye on, because I think eventually it'll become a dinner spot and be really ambitious. But I love going there for the all day. So,
Yeah.
Okay, that's the Kingston report. I mean,
Love it.
I'm glad that we could just talk about that from the jump. We have so much more to cover. But yeah, definitely head to Kingston specifically. I love that town. But Erin, I wanted to ask you about a little bit about what you're doing now. In your career, you're always so thoughtful and so on top of it. We chat a lot offline. We went to college together, and we'll get to that. And I've known you forever, but you founded Ovenly, a very, I would say influential bakery and bar snacks company going further back, and then a CPG company. And then you worked at Seymour. You were a co-founder there. And I'd like to get a sense of what you're doing right now as part of your consultancy. I know you're working with female-led businesses in food, but what exactly are you doing?
I think the easiest way to describe what I do is that I go into companies as a co-founder in residence. Like you said, I founded Ovenly, and then I founded Seymour Meats and Veggies. And then after that, I don't call myself co-founder anymore, because I usually come in for about a year. So I call myself a founding partner. And I'm a founding partner of 4 other businesses that I've launched since 2020.
Shout them out, just so we know.
Yeah. So Sweet Deliverance, which is a really great nutrient-dense granola company. House of Kajana, which is a frozen Indian meals brand that has some big news that will come up soon.
On the show, we're going to break it?
I can't, but
Ah.
I wish I could.
All right.
I love House of Kajana, though.
Yeah, you
Everybody
sent
should
me
buy it.
some. It's a really great product. Really great.
I helped launch BOD, which is a sensorial body company that's just launched, and old friends launched it. They're doing an amazing job. And I'm helping launch a prenatal postpartum snack company that is founded by this amazing functional nutritionist called Mom Snacks.
Great.
Just
name.
announced.
Great name. Seymour, I loved it. I love
Thank
it.
you.
I don't know if it's past since present. Is you can still buy Seymour?
Oh, yeah.
It's a fantastic.
4 regions of Whole Foods, Target.
It's just great. It's better for you meats in a general term. It's more veggie than meat, but great tube steaks, man. Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, but more about your founder in residence. What are you helping with these CPG companies?
So if I come in as more of a founding partner, what I will do is, and this is what happens, someone will come and say, I have an idea and I want to launch it. And I say, okay, let's do it. And so I've had pretty extensive experience now taking an idea of a product and doing what's called commercializing it. So, these are companies that want to scale. I usually work with companies that have either done a fundraise or I help them go into fundraise, and we use that capital to make the product so that we can take it nationally. So that's that side of the business. The other side of the business the business, meaning my consultancy, is I will go into companies that are at a very important point in their life where they're, doing somewhere between 100,000 and maybe $1 million in revenue, and they have grown organically. And they look at themselves and they say, holy shit, I got to fix this so that I can scale without going out of business. or I have to fix this in order to scale because
the extreme-
operations are like not working and we don't have a plan and no strategy.
It's the extreme pressure point that founders, see often, and that dollar range is very common. I mean, it's it's the bottom of the pyramid of these founding companies. And, and you see a lot of tears, I would imagine.
Yeah, and so oh my gosh, I mean, I'm also sort of a untrained psychologist, but I will go into certain companies and I will help them completely redo their operations, look at their finance, create a strategy for the future. It's still sort of a co-founder in residence position, but in those roles, I lean pretty heavily on operations and finance when I go into that kind of role.
Do you take a blend of equity and take a rate, or how do you blend your fees?
Yeah, it depends.
It depends. It's cool.
Yeah, it depends on the client and how much I really believe in the ability for the product to succeed.
What mistakes are you fixing right away? What are you seeing? I would like to hear about a common mistake that you fix over and over again. A lot of founders listen to our show, and a lot of folks in the industry do, and I'd love to get your take.
I'll tell you the top two when I go in to fix a company. One, there are no systems, especially in the food industry where you have a bunch of creative founders and a bunch of folks who are coming out of culinary. It's almost as their companies exist through pure will. Like I sometimes walk into a company and I think, how did you even get to a few $100,000 in revenue? It's really through pure will.
It's like an art project for some of them too.
Yeah.
Like spiritual.
They just are getting things out, but there's no organization.
Like we're just making the work, but
we're just making it happen.
Yeah. Right.
So that's the first mistake. And I think it's really hard when you maybe only have one staff member who's yourself or, you and one other person to be able to sit and like be in the audience and look at the play and say, what is going on here? And like, what moves do I have to make to fix this and to make the show work? So I think it's hard for founders who don't have a lot of support to do that, but it is something that I would encourage anyone who is a small business to do sooner rather than later. So that's one, is just systems are missing. And two, margin. I mean, I work in product companies. I do some work outside of product, but it's almost entirely product. And either that product is represented through retail environments, it's a restaurant, it's a bakery, or it's a consumer packaged product. And 99% of the time, even when founders think they know their margin is incorrect. And so I go in and I really look at every single receipt.
So they're not calculating their expenses correctly, and the margin is higher. It's lower than they think.
Yeah, and usually the reason for that is because of the bookkeeping.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of times people will hire bookkeepers who have no experience in the field because they're cheap. And those bookkeepers will attempt to create financial analysis that are accurate, but they just aren't. And so, for example, and I think a great example of this is consumer packaged food. There's all this stuff that goes into margin, and this is just very technical and boring, but that ends up in below the margin line. So, you got to consider all of your trade spend, which is your retail advertising. That's not even margin. That's a contra revenue. So if you make $1,000 and you spend $100 of couponing for a retail grocery store, that $100 comes out of your revenue. So it's like you made $900. And then there are all these different things that you should really consider in your margin, warehousing, logistics, blah, 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 blah. And I often see those things not included in margin. And margin, when you're a product company, is probably one of the most important assessments.
What about EBITDA?
Business.
Where does that come in?
I mean, EBITDA only matters as long as you have a pathway to it.
Right.
What matters more is that you have cash to cover your losses in the
to keep
start.
The lights on. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which is the margin equals that.
If you can have 50% margins, you're most likely going to have a pathway to profitability.
Right.
And that's what really matters. EBITDA at the beginning, it's great if you can have it, but as long as you have cash to cover those losses, that's what matters. Now, I work with early stage companies. Later stage, that's all that matters.
Course.
Because, I hear a lot of founders say, I want to scale this and sell it. Mm-hmm. And especially in the food industry, I think that we have sort of been imbued with a venture capital mindset where the buyers of food businesses are very conservative and they look at
The strategics, they're like these guides in Omaha or in Georgia. I mean, they're like so financially
or Switzerland,
or Switzerland, great call there, or Long Island. I mean, it's really they're so conservative. Great
because
call.
they're only going to buy businesses that they think they can make money on. The people who actually buy business, not the ones who invest in businesses, but the ones who buy them,
straight up buys,
are looking for very simple things. They're looking that you have increasing revenue, increasing EBITDA at some percentage that's average for your industry, and a good margin.
Yeah.
And so if you scale a company to $200 million, but you have negative $100 million EBITDA and no cash in the bank and no pathway to profitability, even if you have a ton of revenue, you're kind highly doubtful you'll sell.
And there are a lot. We've
of
definitely interviewed many on the show, and I'm not going to name them because it's not my place, who are in that exact great top line, like off the shelves,
crazy top line.
But man, when you look at the EBITDA and you look at the way that like they're spending and marketing costs and shelving costs. And back to your point, when founders tell me about wanting to exit, which some have actually said on the record, such a turnoff. It's in food. I mean, listen, if you're in tech and you're in SaaS, I get it. Like you're doing one thing and I get it. SaaS is a whole different business. But if you're in food, like we're food people here, I don't want to hear about your exit strategy after 18 months. Like go fucking work in California. Except, I mean, obviously food people in California. Go, but you know what I mean?
Valley.
Silicon Valley. Go work in the Valley if you want to do that. I mean, this is a 10-year plan for a lot of these founders.
It's a 25-year plan.
Better, even better.
You know, I think even 10 years is too short of a time horizon to really be successful in the food industry. To really be successful. You know, sure, there are exits that happen but those exits, we hear a lot about these earlier stage exits of some product companies. But at what expense did those exits happen? Usually to the expense of the investors that have put money in. It's usually
pennies on the dollar.
Pennies on the dollar,
always.
Stock trades. You know, it's truly successful. Either you're really rocking and rolling with profits, or you're really in a position for a company like Mondelez to buy you. It's a long time horizon. I hear a lot. I mean, I feel like 70% of the people that come to me say they want to exit in 5 years. Luckily, they're coming to me and I say, that's just not.
Yeah, you give them the advice that, guys, you got it's a 25-year plan. Like you should be in this to win it. This is your.
I also try to remind people, I think it's 1% of companies even get to $1 million in revenue.
That's a great stat to remember.
Just to remember, like if you can even get to $1 million, you should celebrate because you're in the minority of small businesses that even can scale. Now, what you do after that million is going to be critical to the next 10 years. But, you know, my mentor always says what people don't understand when they're coming from outside of the industry and into it is that it takes a year to grow a carrot. And his whole point is you're dealing with supply chain, you're dealing with farms, you know, just to make a plan for scale. When you're creating a dehydrated vegetable bar, you got to think about the futures of kale. You can't just scale for scale's sake in food.
Absolutely. I mean, agriculture is such a big part of it. You know, I had Andrew Benin on twice from Grazia, and, you know, we're talking about real agricultural headwinds for companies. You know, he's trying to buy olive oil from all around the Mediterranean. So you name the company. It's coffee. It could be chocolate. It could be obviously figs. I mean, I want to segue over to Expo West. We both were there last week, walking the floor. I was there only on Wednesday. Thank God. It was Wednesday was intense. I'm not a huge fan.
It is a wild place.
It was fun, and you know, everyone I saw who's listening, you know, great to see you. I met some listeners of the show, which is cool. I want to hear a little bit about some of the things you saw, I guess. Broadly speaking, and I don't want to get into like the trends of Expo West. This is not that type of show. But in general, Erin, what were you seeing that excited you? Let's actually think about the positive side, because there was a lot of janky ass shit there, I must say. I'll end my negative there, but
yeah. Shout out to one of my clients, I think, who actually won this thing called the Nexty Award, which is sort of
Those are cool.
The Oscars of Expo West. They're really trying to create a new Hispanic brand that is true to Oaxaca. It's called Ya Oaxaca. You can look it up, yaoaxaca.com.
Yep.
That's founded by Susana Trilling, who's a Oaxacan chef. they're really trying to create a Hispanic set that is true to Oaxaca, using Oaxacan ingredients, supporting Oaxacan suppliers. And really their products are restaurant worthy. They're restaurant and jar. And rightfully they won this award for that. So I think I didn't see a lot of that type of set this year where there's a company that's saying, I'm going to really tackle, this thing that's true to my heart and scale it and create a bunch of products. I felt like Oaxaca was really one of the few that was doing that.
And they're doing moles, right?
They're doing moles, and they're launching nationally into Whole Foods in June with marinades and escabeche.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with the founders on the show.
They're the best.
Yeah, you have great taste in founders. Was there any category that excited you or surprised you that was popping?
I think no. I get very overwhelmed by those shows. So I walked. I was volunteering with Oaxaca on Thursday, and it was just an in and out of a bunch of my friends who were there. So I felt like I spent so much of Thursday actually just talking to people. And I walked the floor on Friday. I was happy to see, and I haven't been since 2022. And this wasn't poppin' per se, but I was happy to see the change, which was I saw a lot of regenerative farms doing humanely raised meats, which was interesting to me because 2 years ago, everything was about hyper-processed fake meat. None of those companies that I saw 2 years ago were there.
Yeah.
And I think for good reason. I personally believe a lot of those products are not good for you.
Yeah.
And
you're being very kind. I mean, it's a cursed category.
But it's also just made with crap. I mean,
exactly.
When you look at the scale of farmland that some of these companies need to grow, and the monoculture that grows into growing those companies, they're not necessarily better for you. And I really believe in regenerative farming, and I believe in eating regenerative meat. Whatever people believe, that's fine. But I was happy to see that was the change, that we were moving out of this like, hey, we're going to have all these hyper-processed foods, but they're not really meat, and we're going to say that they're better for you. And I just think that's smoke and mirrors. So I was happy to see that trend seemed to be really dying.
When a company aligns with Burger King, that tells you a lot, right? Yeah. There isn't really a helpful element to that company. I don't even say the name. I went to the regenerative section. It was a separate tent, and it was interesting to see like regenerative as a sticker, like organic as a sticker. And it was a real push, and I tried to poke a lot of holes in talking with the folks. Like I always feel like certified organic has a lot of problems, a problematic certification, and any of these certifications are quite expensive and exclusionary. So I think. But regenerative in general as a idea, love to see it everywhere. I mean, I'm glad that it's becoming part of vocabulary. I just worry that the sticker is what's going to drive everything.
Yeah,
and I hate that.
I hope that it doesn't become the next organic certification, because I agree with you. I mean, regenerative practices are very specific. When I hear that word, I think, you're stewarding the land.
Agree.
There's no spray. You're using nature, you're building ecosystems. And as we know, that's really kind of what organic used to be. And so I hope that the term regenerative isn't co-opted by the USDA.
I hope you're right. I fear it's already starting.
For now, we're seeing the beginnings of it, and hopefully it's not all smoke and mirrors. But I just going back to one thing in that regenerative tent, I do think we are moving, even at scale, to something a little bit better. And I do feel hopeful for that, because I think the big players in the industries like the Mondeleses and the Unilevers are looking in their crystal ball that they should have been looking in 1980 and saying, holy crap, if we don't do something about farms, agriculture, regenerative farming, climate change, we don't have businesses. And all of a sudden the business case, unfortunately, in our capitalist society is what's going to drive change. And the business case right now is showing these companies that if they don't do something, they're in trouble.
The young C-suite assistants who are angling to be the next leaderships of these companies in 20 years, the ones who are smart and have the MBAs are exactly to your point, are like, we are going to be out of business if we can't figure out how to actually, maintain our consistency and our velocity, and climate change is going to affect both of those.
Totally. And we've seen it happening in the last 4 years.
Oh my God. Yeah. I have to call out, and I'm going to have her on the show. I got to meet Sophia Chang from Oddball, which is a very interesting, she's disrupting Jell-O. and she's doing it with all natural. So she's no gelatin. It's with konjac and other natural, mostly East Asian products,
like seaweeds.
Exactly. And I tried. She was backpacking it, so like there's a whole industry around the backpacker at Expo X where you just kind of get that $50 badge and kind of go ham. And she and I linked via Andrea Hernandez, so thank you, Andrea. And I really like the product, and I love meeting a founder who is not at that 1 million rev level, but is great with media. I mean, she's fucking fantastic, and she'll be on the show, and we're gonna have a great episode.
That's awesome.
Did you run into any backpackers?
I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
all good.
I really was. I don't know.
You're working too.
I was working the first day, and the second day I was walking around with a couple of friends and trying every new product, so that by the end of the day I was feeling sick.
I know the intake of food at Expo West it's tough. I thought it was a little overcapacity on Wednesday. That's just my one note. Do you feel grocery store is as entertainment is a thing? Do you feel? I know you've worked in this industry. I feel like the media coming out of grocery industry is better than ever. I think that grocery is more exciting than recipes, frankly, to cover, to write about, to obsess about. I love having founders on the show. What do you think?
I don't think that the mass grocer of the world is that fun. But I think what is
true.
I think that
Well said.
what happened in the pandemic was everyone realized that consumer packaged could be fun in a way that they didn't maybe before the pandemic, because we were all just staring at our computers online all day. And even though in-store shopping is back and online shopping for groceries is way down, I think there kind of came into the American consciousness, at least, this idea that you could discover products. And I think grocery is starting to realize, oh, I can't just have Frito-Lay on the shelf. I have to be a place of discovery because that's what my consumer expects.
We got to have Heyday at our end cap.
Or Abora or whatever it is.
On our end cap. Yeah, we got to have
Exactly.
cool brands that are end caps, not just in...
Even my Adams Fairacre has a new product section now, and there's like Fly by Jing and Amsam.
That's so great. But you're a fan of Adams. So is Tamar.
I love Adams.
Yeah, I it's not my favorite in the upstate, but we that's a different show. Adams is good. I'll say. Sorry, but continue. I'm with you, and when I say like grocery shopping, it's like going to ShopRite is not fun, frankly. But to your point, I think this discovery of products, this idea that we're thinking about product drops, we're excited about these small luxuries in life, like this amazing popcorn that has a flavor profile that I've never had with popcorn. I'm down with it. Like, and Andrea writes about it so eloquently in her Substack.
Yeah, I think what Grocer has to catch up with is this. If they both want to be a place of discovery for new brands and attract younger consumers, they've got to fix their model. And it's just a major, the amount of money that it takes to scale in grocery is absurd. And, you know, I won't name names, but there are chains where you just have to pay $3,000 to $4,000 per flavor. So that's called a SKU to just be on the shelf. And then you have no guarantee that they won't kick you off the shelf. So you could, as a small business, say, wow, I have this carrot dangling in front of me. I want to take it. I have these 4 different products. I'm going to spend that $16,000 just to be on the shelf. And then I'm going to invest in paying demo people to demo that product to try to make it work.
Couponing, as you mentioned earlier.
Merchandising. Couponing's a little less, but there are things called off invoices and all these different trade spend line items that you have to really invest in to make one chain work is so onerous on a small business.
Can we just add retail media too? You have to actually spend money.
That's what trade spend includes
same
the
as
retail
media.
Yeah, it's retail marketing. It's off invoices. It's scan
That's the tack in my shoe right now.
Temporary price reductions. All
retail
that
media
stuff.
is a tack in my shoe. I just can't. The retail media just annoy. It's like literally pay to play. That is what retail media is.
That is what it is. And so what happens is what I'm seeing, because I work with women, is that if you have less money, you just have less placement and you have less visibility. And so what you have to do is work your butt off on social to get that name and to get the right placement. Whereas another company that might have more funding is just going to end up, it really comes down to dollars and cents. So I think that if grocery stores who want to have these younger brands on shelf and want to attract younger consumers and want to have their locations be places of discovery, they have to do something better for these younger brands. And UNFI Next and KeHE Elevate aren't enough. Like these distribution plays that last for a year or two, I just truly feel it's not enough. And that's why I love Pop-Up Grocer, because Emily really saw that was a place to disrupt the industry.
It's
need
a
more
fraction of the slotting fees. It's also just giving them the environment and the space, and it's front facing. It's not buried behind other products.
And there's a lot of social media behind it too.
Of course,
so those small brands can leverage their social media. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of fun stuff happening. I love the global flavors that are out in the market right now that truly weren't there 5 years ago. But I want to see that brands can scale and be successful. And for that to happen, we need to have better partnerships with these big grocery chains.
I asked you this in 22 for a print interview we did, and now I'm going to ask you on the show.
Sure.
What's a big story that we in the food media world, in terms of CPG or just in general with founders and the retail space, what are we missing?
I don't think we're talking enough about the article that came out about the link between hyperprocessed foods and brain cognition. I think it's a national health crisis, and I think that some of the newer brands are just trying to be cooler and aren't really looking at that either. But there was an article, for those who don't know, that came out based on a medical journal, very long medical journal study from The Lancet, that said that there's basically a definitive link between hyperprocessed foods with brain cognition, even though it might be slight, increased risk of heart disease, cancer, et cetera. And what is upsetting to me more than the fact that these hyperprocessed foods exist and are allowed to be on shelf when they're just really ruining the health of Americans is that 60% of Americans' calories come from hyperprocessed foods.
Oh, that's such a stat.
It's a horribly depressing statistic. And these really big companies like the Coca-Colas and the Pepsis of the world that are making these foods, they're so good at it. They know the right amounts of fats and sugars and high fructose corn syrup and, quote, natural flavorings that might just be chemicals that they're creating in a lab to make you addicts of that food. And I think we need to talk about that a lot more, because these companies with a small change in process and a small change in ingredients could have massive change to the Americans' health.
Remarkable.
It's really upsetting that these foods are even allowed to be on shelf.
It's remarkable. And you echo exactly a conversation I had with Jamie Oliver in January about reformulation. We're not looking to take away everything. We're not trying to go zero sugar, zero fat, but it's about forcing the major food companies to reformulate to be in a better.
Take out red number 5.
Just take out a few things.
There are mass substitutes now. Like, why are we using a chemical that we know is carcinogenic still in children's foods and candies? It's really, truly upsetting.
Yeah.
So I think we talk about it a little bit. And we kind of talk, the way that media talks about it is like, oh, this is so bad for Americans. But what we're not talking about the other side is big business could easily change this. It would take an investment, but reformulation could happen. Why is the government not funding that? There are policies that we should be looking at that could change this at a mass scale, even if it meant, some people will probably hate this idea, but some sort of public-private partnership so that Americans could be healthier. I mean, we are going to have a mental health and obesity crisis in the U.S., and obesity is now affecting lower-income people more than ever before. Why? Because the foods they can afford and that are available to them are these hyper-processed foods. And it's just the whole thing is very upsetting to me.
I'm glad you highlighted this, and I think we got to move on just because I want to get to other topics. But I appreciate you surfacing this, and it's good food for thought for us as editors to think about. And I'm going to link to the report in our show notes and make sure you guys should check it out. You have a very specific interest, even in an academic way. We'll get into that, but in the franchise. Yeah. And the food franchise, and I feel you have a lot to say, and I definitely want to have you back and talk more about this. But broadly speaking, what interests you so much in the food franchise?
That's funny. So for people who don't know what a franchise is, which I found that a lot of people don't know what a franchise is.
This is great. Let's start there.
There's basically there's a big brand, and they have a retail location and they've decided, or multiple retail locations, and they decide that the next retail locations are going to open are going to be franchised. So they'll be owned by someone else who has to follow their marketing, follow their recipes, buy their equipment set, et cetera. So McDonald's is a franchise. Chick-fil-A is a franchise. There's lots and lots of franchises.
Subway
Sizzling
is the
Platter,
biggest
Subway,
franchise in
yeah.
the country.
Domino's is a franchise. Pizza Hut is a franchise. Auntie Anne's is a franchise. Cinnabon. A lot of the QSR places you go to might be franchises. And what happens is a lot of these franchisees, so the people who own the franchises, they're small business owners. And yes, it looks like it's a big business, but the people who actually own those locations are small business owners. I moonlight in tech, which we just talked about. So yes, I sometimes work with Silicon Valley, but I work with these entrepreneurs.
That was me talking about you. You got that like direct delta
I'm
to
like,
San Francisco.
Oh, Matt hates it.
No, I don't hate it, but I do. Anyways.
But no, I work with a couple of folks out in Silicon Valley who are really thinking critically about how technology can unlock different business models. And for me, the business model I'm interested in is franchising because I think it could be a pathway to ownership and entrepreneurship without as much risk. There's a risk with opening anything. Like you could open a place and it just doesn't work, but you get a little bit of a de-risking if you are buying into a brand that people know.
Especially with like national spend, marketing spend.
Yeah,
You don't
they're
have
spending
to think
marketing,
about that. Yeah.
You're paying a licensing fee and you're paying franchising fee and the corporate office is taking care of most of the rest. Yeah, you might have your own social media for your location that you're promoting, but it's really a lot of the nuts and bolts that are hard to figure out about business are taken care of by the corporate. And actually what's happening is corporations used to own some percentage of their own franchises, 20, 30%. And a lot of franchises are saying, well, hey, our franchisees run these better than us.
Yeah.
We're not even going to own them
McDonald's
anymore.
was famously had a number of their locations were corporate, right?
Yeah.
And they
a lot of them are, yeah.
A lot of them still are,
Yeah.
right? That might be the counterexample because they do pretty much everything right.
Yeah,
in a way,
but I think that some big franchises are looking at this and saying, maybe we shouldn't own.
Yeah.
So anyways, I just think that I've been interested in this for a long time, looking at how to make franchises more affordable through technology to bring in a whole new generation of business owners into the economy. Because, 60% of Gen Z, 60% of millennials, they want to own businesses, but they feel like there is a barrier for them to do that, which is obviously money.
So in speaking of money, I mean, broadly speaking, what is the startup capital required for a franchise? I know it varies dramatically based on the franchise. Is it as much as we'd assume? Is it more than we assume?
Depends on the region and depends on the franchise.
It's a tough question, I know.
I'm really unfamiliar with, there's all sorts, there's a Stanley Steamer as a franchise.
Yeah.
The Maids is a franchise.
Right.
I don't know what those things cost. I look largely just in restaurant,
It's
retail.
Food. We can talk about food.
Totally about food. But minimally, at the very bottom barrel, you turnkey bought a franchise from someone. Like someone was running it and you're going to buy it maybe $150,000.
Yeah.
Into the millions. It just depends on where you're opening. Because the franchisee does the real estate leasing and acquisition. So it just depends on where you're opening that franchise.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting that deal locked in and making sure that that location is obviously most of the risk is that location and your rent.
The one exception in the food industry, and people are probably not going to like this, is Chick-fil-A. And Chick-fil-A, which, yes, the owner has very problematic politics. I will point out that they have stopped funding these terrible anti-LGBTQ companies.
Because they're not fucking morons. They've actually figured it out a little bit.
They saw that they were wrong.
They were wrong.
And the owner still has problematic politics. I will not deny that. But I actually know the first openly gay Chick-fil-A owner. They did change their tune a little bit because I think they realized that so much of their staff was not in line with the owner.
Yeah.
So politics aside, Chick-fil-A does something super interesting, which is basically it's $10,000 to own a franchise. And it's harder to do that than get into Harvard.
Yeah.
Because they like to bring people up through the system. So a dishwasher might end up owning a franchise. And if you go through the franchising program, they select you and you can't afford the $10,000, they loan it to you. And they do everything else. They actually own a lot of their real estate too. They build it out. All you have to do is run it.
Yeah.
But you can only own one. So a lot of the franchises in the country are owned by huge multi-brand, multi-franchise corporations.
Holding companies.
They're holding companies that own 900 Taco Bells or whatever. So I think that the Chick-fil-A model is pretty interesting, and people could check it out because it is a pathway to having a really great, solid career.
Yeah. Interesting about the franchise model. I'd love to have you back to talk more about the idea of emboldening, especially folks who work their way up in food service to ownership, to wealth, to retirement, to success. We went to college together. We kind of buried the lead on that. We went to UW-Madison in the late 90s. And what do you take away from that time in that era, food wise? Is there anything that you remember about that era that maybe our listeners would be interested in?
I mean, I've always been obsessed with food.
Yeah.
But I grew up eating truly Taco Bell 2 or 3 nights a week. Rally's burgers. I mean, all sorts of fast food. I had no limitation on the amount of sugar and processed foods I ate. Soda pop, all of it. And Madison, I remember one of the first meals I had. My friend's father, who's now passed away, was just a bon vivant. And he used to take Jessica and I in high school to this place called the Chicago Athletic Club, where he would drink bourbons and smoke cigars, and we'd have like Shirley Temples in this like beautiful old building. And he took us to L'Etoile, which still exists. And which I don't know if you remember L'Etoile.
Oh, I got my own L'Etoile story.
Oh, I mean, and that was, I had been to Stars in San Francisco, which was Jeremiah Hightower's restaurant, which changed my life when I was 15. But L'Etoile, I was like, wow, I'm in a city where people are just doing this farm to table thing. And I had such an amazing meal. And it was my first exposure to farmers markets. You know, I grew up in a pretty lower middle class environment, and we didn't go to farmers markets. And I went every Saturday morning, almost the entirety of my
up at the square. It was an absolute, it's
huge
one
farmers
of the bigger
market
ones in the country.
The capital.
My L'Etoile story is I was visiting Madison as a senior in high school, and we asked the person giving the tour, like, where should we go? And they mentioned L'Etoile. And so I walked up those stairs, got to the second floor of the restaurant in 1997. Yeah. And like yourself, I grew up in West Michigan, and I had a little bit of experience with farmers markets, but certainly I didn't have experience with this French centric farmers market Midwestern cooking that they were doing there. And I've since become good friends with Tori Miller, who's now the chef owner of L'Etoile. And I haven't been back in years, but it's such a legendary place.
Yeah. It was my friend from high school's aunt owned a restaurant out there. I can't remember the name. It was like Coyote something, and it was down in the Willie Street district. But I think it was...
was it Southwest? Back in the 90s, they had like a little Southwest movement.
It wasn't Southwest. Yeah. It was another farm-to-table restaurant. Okay. But I think that the thing that Madison did for me was it really introduced me to the farm-to-table movement and to farmers markets, and totally changed the way that I ate.
Yeah. For me, too, it was coffee. It was a real awakening, like the Espresso Royale chain, but also some of the local spots as well, and actually caring about the coffee service. Because before then, I was like going to like literally gas stations. We didn't have Starbucks in my town at that point. Yeah. And it was cool to see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, cocktails, too.
I mean, cocktails with Tornado Room.
Yeah.
And also what I think Madison kind of as a 40-something now, I think about is the staying power of a lot of those restaurants. They're still there, and they've just been doing hospitality and service great for 20 or 30 years.
Absolutely. Tornado Room is still, I went in 2019, really still doing really great work. And I think that's the beauty of operating in a college town. Every year you reboot with like 35,000 new people, totally. Plus all the parents and all the friends. Yep. And so you're always like reshuffling the deck. So that's a cool thing. Erin, on This Is Taste, we ask guests about their discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire, fast and furious taste check. Are you ready?
Yeah.
The best fruit.
Passion fruit.
I love that answer. It's never come up. Why?
Because I think I've loved to suck those seeds out of the shell, but I also love all the different ways you can bake with it and make things with it and use it in ice cream or popsicles or ganache. I love it.
It's so crazy that this is the first time you said the word bake, because that's like truly
that's where I got my start.
That's where you
11
got your
years.
start.
11 years.
I'm glad we didn't focus on Ovenly though. I mean the vegan peanut butter cookie is still like like Hall of
Gluten-free.
Fame.
Gluten-free. Vegan chocolate chip.
I'm sorry, that's right. The
But that's okay.
gluten-free peanut butter, the vegan chocolate chip.
Yeah.
Both of those are in my Hall of Fame. They're both incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah, you guys devised it. A great business there. I loved it. The worst vegetable.
Kale.
Yeah, right?
I don't like kale. I'm sorry. I've been eating it for 20 years at least.
Dang.
I just am not a big kale fan. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree. Saute, I'll take spinach. In a salad, I'll take romaine.
Yeah, maybe a baby kale like
Yeah.
microgreen or something. But yeah, I'm just not that into kale.
Yeah, I've been off the kale at sweet green. I just can't do it.
Yeah, it's like just cardboard.
It's not fun. The best dessert. It's you. I'm asking you this. Jeez, I'm asking Erin.
Honestly, a perfect chocolate chip cookie is probably a melty, warm chocolate chip cookie. Sorry, Allison Roman. It's my favorite.
Yeah, I agree.
Love
I feel.
it.
I also love a restaurant that serves them as like a dessert course.
Yeah, like a warm, gooey brown butter chocolate chip cookie.
Yeah, no,
It's
it's
the
nothing.
best.
But I mean,
Salty,
does
sweet.
it have to? I mean, gluten-free chocolate chip? Is it
No.
okay? This is where you separate yourself from your probably second most famous SKU at Ovenly. Yeah, I agree. I need to go full.
Yeah,
full
I
rip
mean,
with
I
this
do
one.
love the Ovenly's cookies, but I also just love like a brown butter chocolate chip cookie.
Your favorite American fast food chain?
I honestly, I ate so much fast food growing up. I really like never go to fast food.
Yeah.
I would say I probably go more to like fast casual if I go at all, in which case Cava Grill. I
Yeah.
think they do a really good job for what it is.
It's funny. I passed one on Route 17 coming into the city. I've never been to one.
Yeah,
Never been.
I think it's like very much healthier,
Yeah,
Mediterranean diet based. It's good for what
I'm
it
gonna
is.
stop by. I like it. Your favorite New York City restaurant right now?
Favorite New York City restaurant. I mean, I'm kind of a person who I love a place and then I just keep on going. Servos is one of my go-tos. I just love Servos.
Yeah, top to bottom, great service, great.
It's great
dessert,
food.
great-
Love it.
Yeah. Your favorite Chicago restaurant right now, where you grew up, which we didn't even get into, but that's where you grew up.
One of my top 10 restaurants in the world is Lula.
Yeah.
I just every time I go back, I go there. I love it. I think it's
Yeah.
so delicious. Though I did have an amazing meal at Daisy's last time I was in
Haven't
town.
been to
It was
Daisy's, but
really
Lula,
good.
Jason Hamill was on the show. I'll definitely, you should check out that episode. But yeah, it's so consistent.
You know, I was there, just a quick story. This is what I love about hospitality. I went there maybe a couple years ago, and the woman who was doing the water service was like, "Oh my God, I haven't seen you in so long." Because I used to go there every weekend when I lived in Chicago.
Oh,
And she remembered me.
That's
and I
great.
was like, "Oh my God, this makes me feel so welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much."
It's
You know,
such
it was really awesome.
you can't not go to Lula if you're in Chicago.
Yeah.
Your favorite cookbook of all time?
Ooh. I think there's one I go back to a lot, which I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's such a resource for me, which is Flavor Flowers by Alice Medrich. Really, if you're a baker, it's just an awesome book on how to use flours for flavor. And it really kind of helped me when I was deep in baking, think about that. And I like cookbooks for reference more than I like them for recipes. So
Yeah.
I really
You
love
pull them
that
off the
book.
shelf, pull up a technique.
Yeah, yeah.
A cuisine you would like to learn more about?
Oh, you know, I was just talking about this with one of my friends. Georgian,
Yeah.
the country of Georgia. I really want to go to Georgia. I've have multiple friends who've been there that have been, you know, I've been to Georgian restaurants in New York,
Yeah.
but I just really have heard amazing things, that mix of like Eastern European, Middle Eastern, Western European cuisine. I really would love to go.
Kafana. You've probably been to Kafana, right?
I've been to Kafana
Yeah.
and I've been to, oh my gosh, what's the name? Chama Mama?
That sounds about right.
I
I'm
think
not.
it's Chama Mama. Yeah. Kafana I went to years and years and years ago, but Chama Mama in the past few years.
How do you pronounce the capital of Georgia?
Tbilisi?
So you're gonna go? You're gonna book a ticket?
I don't know. I mean, one day.
Last one. Your favorite sandwich?
R.I.P. the scuttlebutt from Salty.
Salty, man. I
That
knew
was
it.
my favorite sandwich
Yeah.
of all time. I have looked up the recipe and tried to recreate it on my own. I just never have made it as good as they did. I love that
A
sandwich.
great sandwich shop is hard to find.
Yeah.
It really is. The margins just aren't there. Speaking of margins, it's just a tough thing to. You got to sell them for $25 a piece.
Yeah.
But Erin Patinkin, this has been so much fun.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for joining This Is Taste.
Thank you.
This is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbar. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.